Hello again, folks, and I hope you're up for another challenge this Tuesday. Actually, these challenges are getting bigger and bigger because I'm asking you to remember more and more of these Bible verses. Remember what the first one was a couple of weeks ago? John 15 and verse 5. Last week I gave you 1 Corinthians 1 and 27. It went like this: but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. My suggestion to you was that every time you repeated that verse in the week that's passed, that you reminded yourself of the fact that we must never measure ourselves by the world's standards. Here's a short verse for you for this week. It's Psalm 20 and verse 7. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. My aim last week was to change your way of thinking about what it is to be a servant of God. I mentioned that again on Sunday when I spoke about King Solomon asking God for wisdom. I want to repeat this again because it's an important concept. God's servant does not ask for the list of duties, go off and do them, come back and say to God, what did you think of that? Didn't I do well? No, God's servant waits to see what God himself wants to do, and that person leaves him or herself available for God to accomplish his own purpose through that person. And this should help us in Braniel as we are the type of church, or we want to be the type of church that wants to reach out. Here's a teaching that I learned some years ago. It's old-fashioned, but it's true. And it goes like this: the Holy Spirit convicts people of their sin. Tied along with that is another theological term which I'm not even going to explain because it's a whole sermon in itself. It's a phrase that we use called prevenient grace. Now, if you want to know more about that, give me a phone, text me, or send me an email, and I'll do my best to explain it, but I haven't time to do so here. What that basically means, and what I'm trying to get across to you today, is that if you take somebody who has never had any time in their lives for God, that person isn't going to wake up someday and suddenly say to you, do you know what I think? I'll go out today and look for God. Now, there might be something in their mind that makes them ask you about God. Something in their mind that makes them ask you about God, and that something is, well, it's not their own initiative. That is God at work. People do not seek God on their own initiative. People won't ask about spiritual matters unless God is at work in their lives. Now, look, I fully understand what people mean when they will say to you, you know, I had a wonderful time. I led somebody to the Lord recently. It's a lovely concept. It's a lovely thing for people to say, but I would rather hear people say and express it this way. You know this, I was humbled to be in the place where God could use me to draw that person to himself. Yeah, I understand what it's meant, but it's a dangerous thing to take the focus off God and put the focus onto yourself. I remember one time preaching a sermon about moving from self-centeredness to God-centeredness. See, actually that's what Jesus was talking about when he said that we should deny ourselves and take up our cross. That's what salvation is really all about. It's the opposite of denying yourself. And the opposite of denying yourself is to affirm yourself. In other words, look how good a person I am. That's not a good thing. To deny yourself is to be in that place where God can accomplish his purposes through you, through me. Again, I've told you about the story in Numbers where the 12 spies are sent into the promised land. They are all supposed to come back and give their reports. 10 of the 12 come back and say, hey, we saw that place. Oh yeah, it's a grand place to think about. But don't go near it. Don't go near it because the place is full of giants. Folks, that's self-centered thinking. Joshua and Caleb, they were the two who came back and said, and I'll quote from the Bible, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people. That's being God-centered. It's about waiting to see what God is doing and then being prepared to join him. Let me quote from Henry Blackaby, the man that I've been talking about over these past few weeks. And he says this: God will accomplish more in 6 months through a people yielded to him than we could do in 60 years without him. And I've said countless times before, and I'm saying it again. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Do you really believe right now, as I'm talking to you now, that God is at work around you? He's the one who's taking the initiative. Where I live around here, there's a lot of building work going on. They're still building at houses. And some days you look out and you see diggers at work, and you see cement mixers working, you hear men up on the roof shouting to each other. And you say to yourself, oh, the men are at work today. Then other days it's all quiet, maybe at the weekends, and you say to yourself, well, obviously they're not working today. Is that the way it is with God? You look out and you say, I see God at work in the church up the street this week. And then maybe tomorrow you look out and you say, I suppose God must be way in Portrush or way somewhere else, some other town or whatever. How stupid is that to say that? And yet you and I act as if that is the case. We act as if that God is not at work around us. And here's an expression, another one that it's like, look, I'm sorry if I sound like I've been very negative today, but there are some little things that sometimes I would like to correct. And I know what the people who use this expression are trying to say when they tell you about a wonderful event that they were at, service or a convention or a great prayer meeting or something, and they say it was so good. You know this, God turned up. God turned up. I know what they're saying. I know what they mean. They say it was a time of real blessing. But God didn't just turn up. He was there all the time. He was there even before they came. He's ready to pour out His blessing on us all the time. But what He needs is for you and me to be in the right place so that we can receive it. Listen to Philippians chapter 2 and verse 13. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose. Methodist circles, there used to be an awful lot of talk, maybe not so much talk nowadays, about John and Charles Wesley, two men who were active in the 1700s along with George Whitefield and other evangelical people, and what they were involved in was, it has become known as the Evangelical Revolution. I know some Methodists who nearly worship John Wesley more than God Himself. Now, of course, I'm joking. But of course, the names of the Wesleys and others have gone down in history. But the danger is that we applaud them far too much for the work that they did. What's my point today? It was God who did the work. He was always going to do the work. He was there, as I say, all the time. And if you read history, what you see is that God was actually bringing the Wesleys and others to the place where He could use them. The amazing thing is this, that God is still in the same business today as He was in the 1700s. He's still in the same business today as He was in the days of Wesley. It's just that He chooses to work only through God-centered Christians, not self-centered ones. Are we God-centered, as I asked before? Or are we just self-centered? Psalm 20 verse 7, don't forget it. Write it down along with the other memory verses. Put it in your fridge. Psalm 20 verse 7. Some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. God bless you, and I'll talk to you again soon.